Okay, Gerhart City Council work session for February 5th, 2025 is called to order. We are talking rules of the council. All right. So many of you have changes on your documents. So shall we just go from the first page, City of Gerhart Rules of the Council, and we add or subtract whatever it is that a person finds? All right, does anyone have a change for the rules of the council? Page 3.
Moving to 2. See what's the edit. Yes, okay, so no, not on page 3.
Okay, we got page 4, the scope and council communication guidelines.
Yes. So down on the bottom line of the scope, where it says we're going to review the rules every November.
Right?
I would recommend that we either change it to December or we change it to January so that it captures the newly elected folks.
Let us go to January. That way we don't have to have a work session prior to them having them sworn in, do a work session, and then go to city council.
Okay.
So we'll make that December, I mean, January. So. Anything else under council communications?
I have a question because we've done this a number of different ways throughout the last year. And when somebody wants to make a change, like for example, I want to make change to this, how does the council feel, how do we want to go about this? Because some people have submitted things to the city and asked the city to type it up and distribute it on their behalf. But if I'm reading this correctly, council members are supposed to speak for themselves. And I don't think that having the council type up changes or make recommendations for changes on behalf of a councilor is the appropriate way to go. I don't think that a particular councilor who may or may not agree with other councilors should be able to, and I don't, for want of a better way of describing it, compel the city to put forth a stance that may, that represents a particular councilor when it may not be the opinion of all of the councilors. You know what I'm saying? We're supposed to speak for ourselves.
Right.
Okay, so let me just be clear about what is being said. So you are maintaining that if somebody asks the city to type up something to be distributed, that's an indication that the city's taking a stance?
Well, if I gave them something and said, type it up verbatim, and it is then circulated representing my opinion, that's one thing. If I give them some bullet points that they have to then interpret and try and figure out what it is I'm trying to say, and then distribute it, that I don't think that that's appropriate, no.
Okay.
Which line are we speaking about here?
We're not, where it says a council member shall speak for herself or himself.
Page 5, second line down from the top. The council member shall speak for himself, herself, or himself.
Okay, but it's understood that it came from ex-council person, even if the city typed it, right?
Right, I think it. Tell me if I'm getting it wrong, Dana. You're saying that an idea shouldn't be put forth to the staff to make an ordinance. You can have the city staff type something up if it's complete, but they're not there to write what you want as an ordinance until it goes to the point where we have to submit it to Peter and have Peter go through it. And that's when we get the final document. Is that any clearer?
Yeah, I don't think that we should ever put city staff in a position where they feel like they are having to sell one counselor's position on something.
Yeah, well, would be totally inappropriate anyway.
Yeah.
All right, the thing with that. I'm gonna check with the rules of construction, because I think there's something in there that says a counselor can write an ordinance themselves and submit it with their signature on it. And that gives them credit for that ordinance. So let me just check with that, but I think that asking staff to type a maybe not quote unquote a finished document, but the intent of the document, so that Peter can get a handle on it and say, this is valid or this is not valid. That would be handy, because I am not gonna sit there and type something, because it takes me.
Yeah, using them as your typing tool, I think, is completely different from asking them, giving them a couple of bullets and asking them to construct something, interpret what you're trying to say and then construct it. If you give them a fully written out something and just say, type it, so because people won't be able to read my handwriting, that's different from, you know, a couple of bullet points and then make a document from this.
Okay, so I will check with the rules of construction.
But in effect, isn't the same thing happening ultimately? So one of the counselors types up the document or has the city type it up, whichever happens. And then it's submitted to like Peter for his review, and
Right.
it's probably maybe submitted to Garrett for his review.
Yeah, if it's a land use, I guess that would be appropriate that it go to Garrett.
But isn't the ultimate outcome the same thing? I'm not.
What I'm saying
I'm
is,
sorry.
my concern is counselors possibly putting city staff in a bad position where the city staff are forced to articulate a particular counselor's position when another counselor may not agree with that position, and it puts city staff in an untenable position. They should not be arguing our positions, we should be arguing our own positions, because in essence, we are their supervisors, and you can't put them between counselors.
So initially, I agree with that, but ultimately, Peter, for instance, is going to end up weighing in. So say, Preston writes an ordinance and it goes to Peter for review, right?
No,
I mean,
no, it doesn't.
I've got to look at
Just a
the
minute. Just a minute.
construction.
Okay? This guy over here deals with the girls in the office. We don't deal with the girls in the office.
I'm
Okay?
talking about that.
No. If we have something that we want to present, we present it to Chad. He's the administrator, okay?
Yeah.
He then decides where it goes. We don't have, I'm not allowed to come in here and ask the girls to do something.
Yeah, I'm not advocating, that wasn't.
Council sets policy, city staff administers policy. They're separate functions, okay? It states right in here that all employees of the city are under his jurisdiction.
I understand that, that wasn't what I
I
was
know,
asking.
but I mean, what we're saying is, we're bringing something in, for the girls to type up or to present.
You're right, Preston. It is more to the point that it goes to Chad. And Chad goes to the whatever secretary or whatever you want to call it, person who's going to do the typing for the reading. Okay?
I mean, it's pretty well laid out in the council rules here. We set policy, they administer. It goes through him.
So then does Chad submit it to Peter or Garrett, depending on? Is that the,
Not to dump more on you, because you.
No, I mean, that's just the way that it goes anyway, that's how it works.
Okay,
so do we need to put that in writing in this section then, or?
well, it says that right there, not involve themselves or influence the city
I
administrator.
was just asking for clarification on that because over the past year, we've had a couple of times where the council has not been in agreement on particular issues and this has come up and city staff kind of been put in the middle of it.
Okay, well, then we can put that in there.
I'm comfortable with just everybody just saying, yeah, in the future, we have, if we have a document that we want circulated, we will type it ourselves in entirety. And if we give it to staff to type up, it will be with the expectations that they will not make changes or add to it or make your argument.
I'd go with the second one. I'm not a good typist. I'm a horrible typist.
Well, we also have to remember that that they are very, very busy and we don't know what they might be working on, so again, yeah. So
Okay.
the rest of this point, it has to go through chat to make sure that.
Well, we've got that in here, it's just we could make it
I just wanted
clearer.
clarification on that. That's all, I just wanted clarification on that.
All right. So on page 6, on the last line of the first paragraph. Okay, it goes city licenses or permits, comma, except by direction of the entire council, and it should be the majority or a quorum of the council. Because you don't need an entire council directing it, it's a quorum. That's my only correction I've got on that page.
I think that's what they intended to say, but they just didn't.
Mr. Mayor? you
Yes,
got-
ma'am?
You got hands up online, and Chad, you might need to adjust the camera because none of you are on it.
Okay.
Paulina, yes. Is Paulina muted?
Yeah, Colette, I think it would be probably easier if you just spoke. I don't know if we're gonna notice that hand as well.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just gonna comment on what Dana had spoken about at the beginning of when she started speaking, and that was about a council member, she'll speak for himself or herself. My interpretation of that is just that we as counselors have to be careful not to speak for the council, but we are giving our opinion. And that may or may not be the opinion of the council. And the document I know later on talks about once we take action and get a course of action, then of course we take that as what we're going to communicate.
Excellent point.
I just wanted to point that out. As far as the document, Carrie, your change sounds good to me, but I personally don't have any other changes to make in the document. So I'll just listen along. And Sharon, if you need typing, I'm a good typist. I can always type for you.
Thank you.
Peter, I'm gonna ask you.
Yeah, just normally how you guys have done things is like, an example would be the fire fees. So you tasked me and Chief Andy to come up with an ordinance. Chad, of course, reviewed that. That was distributed to you. Some of you had different questions or different comments. You brought those to the meeting and we had that discussion in the meeting, which is where it should happen. And then Chief Andy and I were able to make some clarifications as a result of that and end up with a product that I think more accurately reflected exactly what you as a council were looking for. And so that's normally what would happen is you would say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, whatever the initiative is, Peter, would you work with staff in order to come up with an ordinance or write an ordinance? Or sometimes they'll do the first shot of it and I'll review and make edits. And then we bring that to you and you guys all kind of bring your own comments to that meeting. And as long as we're not making any major changes, as long as they're just minor changes, we're usually able to take care of it at that meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So has anyone got any other changes on page 6, use and disclosure of confidential information?
I have a question. Just exactly how long is the Oregon retention laws regarding how long we have to keep?
I asked Peter last time and he said, just give your papers to staff and they'll go through them.
Yes, so they keep changing the retention. The public records laws actually date, same thing with a lot of the public meetings laws, date from the early 70s. So there was a long period of time where cities basically got to retain what they wanted. With changing to electronics and just the volume of documents that are being generated, as well as there was a case involving a Westland city councilor that would take notes in a notebook during meetings. Ultimately, those were comprehensive notes expressing opinions on items. Those notes were held to be public records by the Court of Appeals. So the state is providing updated guidance as far as retention for things such as resolutions, ordinances. We should keep those kind of in perpetuity. If you guys are scribbling stuff on a paper, like a vote count, like 3-2 or something that already is reflected in the minutes, or we probably can get rid of those. If you're commenting on like the quality of evidence being given in notes, then those are public records that we would want to keep with those meeting materials. So the problem with the Westland case is that it muddied the waters a little bit, and so it requires you guys to look at what you're taking the notes on. So like if you check off the agenda item, so just as a check mark on it, then you're not adding anything to what was in the record. If you were to write something like, I believe this traffic engineer offered compelling testimony, and you didn't state that, but you were writing something related to the quality of evidence or something substantial, excuse me, then we would want to preserve those.
So would you recommend that at the, each counselor, when we leave, we should, if we haven't already, turned over any pertinent documents to who is our records keeper for the city? Is that Chad? So we would turn it over to him so that should we get a Public Record Act request, or you guys call it a FOIA request here, after my term is up, they still have my documents and they can produce them rather than, having to go through all of the past counselors.
Yeah, so if you're writing anything of substance on your agenda or as part of the meeting notes, then we would need to preserve that. If you're just putting an X next to the agenda item or writing 3-2 vote, that's already going to be reflected in the minutes. So you can just toss those or keep them for yourself. That really where it's important is if and most of you are really, I think, good at if you believe something as far as quality of evidence, you just say it. And if you interpret something one way or the other, you say it on the record. So, but there are jurisdictions or counselors where they wouldn't, and their notes actually offered kind of a view into how they were processing the evidence or coming to their conclusion. And because that wasn't anywhere else in the record, then it was necessary for the city to keep those documents.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on retention? All right, so let's go to council meetings. Anyone got any corrections or changes for,
Yes.
okay,
On page 7, down in the second paragraph where it says special meetings. It says special meetings of the council may be called by the mayor or by the president of the council in the mayor's absence or by consent of a majority of council members. And that's not consistent with what the charter says. The charter says a special meeting may be called within 48 hours by mayor alone or at the request of 2 councils. It shall be called or will be called, or at any time with the common consent of all members of the council. So 2 members of this council could force a meeting on something. And I think that that's an important right that we have that should be cemented here in the rules.
okay, so I'm gonna check with the rules of construction, but I think that's perfectly understandable that it's 2 councilors.
Well, that's-
Does anyone have any
charter?
challenge to that?
So we're basically, we're gonna take this paragraph here and just go with the charter says.
Well, I would say, yeah, I would make it align with the charter where it says, or at the request of 2 councils, it says special meeting may be called within 48 hours by the mayor alone. Or at the request of 2 councilors shall be called, or at any time by the common consent of all members of the council. That's what's written in the charter.
Okay, so you don't wanna keep in there president of the council?
That's actually, I don't even know that is in the charter, that the president alone can call it. Let me take a look.
If the mayor's out of town,
Right, if she's acting as the mayor, then yes, she could. So in which case you wouldn't even need to say, oh, okay, well then it's, yeah, then that's fine. I have no problem with that. Well, but what I'm saying is what I want to cement in there is the right of, let's say you and I, Sharon, say, no, this is a real problem, and everybody else says it's not a problem. We can say, oh no, we're gonna demand a special meeting on this. And that way, if something really horrible was happening, we found somebody stealing money or somebody was, you and I could force a meeting. Whereas under the way it's written in this council rules right now, we couldn't do that.
I don't even think I need to check the charter because I think I remember reading that. Can we just put it by consent of 2 councilors,
2 members of council?
Yeah.
2 members of council?
At the request of 2 councilors. And then, yeah, that's it for me on that.
Okay,
I have a question. But it's on page 8.
okay, no one else has got something on 7? All right, let's go to 8.
Okay, and I don't know who this question goes to. I don't know if it goes to you or maybe to Peter or Chad knows this. It's about the media representatives, and I have 2 questions. The first one is, at what level of government was it decided that the media can be present in executive sessions? And what was the rationale for that?
Keep us honest. And it was the legislature that passed it, I believe.
So it's
Peter?
Yeah, that's a state law that allows them access to the executive session, and it is, the mayor's correct, it was the legislature, and it was further codified in the Attorney General's manual on public meetings.
Okay, thank you.
And that's one of the reasons why we retain that who qualifies as media. Because you can have someone come in and say, I'm media, because I got a phone. And just make a storybook tape. All right. Anyone got any more on 8? And if not, how about 9?
You know, I have additional things to say, but they're not already.
Okay, so you want to give us a rundown of what additional things you need? Or feel they should be in?
Well, I've been racking my brain on this for a while, trying to figure out how we would write it into the rules, and I don't know that it necessarily, I don't know that we can compel somebody, but I think we should put something in there that, about required training, that I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we were told that, we went through our emergency response document, and, we were told about some FEMA training that we had to go through. Now, current councilor members, some of our current councilor members have not gone through that training because they didn't know about it, they weren't here when we did that.
Right,
But if they don't go through that FEMA training, we could have a problem. For example, if a FEMA grant were to come up for a public safety building and we're not all in compliance and haven't gone through the required training, we could be disqualified from applying for that grant or from receiving that grant. So I think that there has to be, or should be, some kind of verbiage in the rules of council that says that, counselors will attend training when it's required of counselors and within a reasonable amount of time.
what's a reasonable amount of time, a year?
Well, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's less than that, so I don't know that you have to, you can define a reasonable might be different based on the circumstances. They might have something that comes down that says all counselors have to go through, sexual harassment training and apply by January 30th.
Sure,
You know?
okay. Well, you're right about that FEMA training, it's,
So we need to get everybody through that and then get through our tabletop exercise. That's one concern I've had for a while.
okay, Chad, what is that, I know Josh is out there waiting anxiously to come in. What is that training called? It's for the, emergency,
It's right there on the tip of my tongue, I can't remember it. It has to do with, working within, an emergency situation.
Right.
Part of that is,
Emergency preparedness training.
yeah, there's another name for it, that or, the harassment training, that sort of thing, so.
ICS,
ICS, thank you, the incident command system.
right, okay. So we know how to fill out our FEMA forms. We know how to respond to different scenarios and what the hierarchy is that we deal with when you go into a situation that is.
What are we supposed to have, Chad, under the ICS? What module?
We will get
Yeah,
Josh to come out.
Yeah, it's like 600, 700. I can make it up, but Josh would be better able to answer that.
Yeah,
so how about something along these lines? As we know that this is gonna be an ongoing training requirement for any new counselor that joins us. Could we write it in here that all newly elected counselors shall comply with that training, specify that training
ICS training,
within, let's say, 2 months of their, of taking office. And any other training that is prescribed. Yeah, within a reasonable amount of period or by legally mandated time period.
I don't think you can go through ICS training in 2 months unless you're doing it
Online.
3, well, yeah, you do it online.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's 4 or 5 hours a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, how much time? I'm not arguing whatever you wanna say. If you wanna say a couple of months, if you wanna say
Yeah,
6 months.
so I would give 6 months and that way, people can put it off to the end.
And then the ethics training, you know, it just depends on when the LOC is willing to
It was
schedule.
supposed to be yesterday.
Yeah, I think LOC has a webinar on ethics training. It isn't the same as going through the Secretary of State, the Ethics Commission, but at least getting some kind of training.
Right. And I mean, there were some other training, and a lot of the training we'll do, just like we recently did the mandated reporter training where we did it as a group and it's.
Right.
We can do that easily, but I just think we need something in this document that addresses training, otherwise it's gonna be forgotten when none of us are sitting on the council anymore,
Sure.
so.
How about a statement that says something like all counselors are required to complete, maintain current certifications for all mandatory training programs, including FEMA ICS and ethics training, et cetera, as soon as practical. Documentation of completed training must be submitted to the council secretary promptly upon completion. Not applied for his own disciplinary action, but I don't know if they need to put that.
Yeah, I don't think you need that last part, because I mean, we're not gonna mandate disciplinary action.
Okay, and have we elected a secretary of the council?
No, I mean, we have our recorder, so that would be a better term.
Okay. All right. Is there anything? Yes, there is.
One is a clarification for, I noticed that during the campaign season, that there was some question, this comes up regularly, how do we fill vacancies? And the public seems to think that we should go out for an election. I just wanted to point out to everybody that during my deep dive into the charter, our charter says that vacant elective city offices shall be filled by appointment by a majority vote of the remaining members of the council. The appointee's term of office begins immediately on appointment and continues through the unexpired term of his or her predecessor. So I just wanted to clarify that for any public who might be listening, and I wanted to make sure I got it on the record that that's an important note, because some people seem in the community seem to be confused about whether we even have the option to go out for a vote, a special vote to elect somebody to office.
No.
And it actually says that we appoint here, and that saves the city some money. And then I have one other thing, how do we spend money? How one particular counselor spends money. Let's say I come in with a document and I want it mailed out, and it's not a document that the other 4 council members would agree with. It doesn't represent the opinion of the councilors. I'll take the tree ordinance as an example. What if I wrote up something as a proponent of the tree ordinance and came in and gave city staff it and said, I want this mailed out on the city's dime to everybody? Would that be appropriate?
All right, Peter.
Or is that something that the council as a whole would want to vote on, which is what I'm thinking is the correct answer?
Well, so there are a couple of things. Anytime you're using city resources, you have to be really careful. And that's particularly true if there's an issue that could be on the ballot, because our communications need to be neutral. The other thing that I would say is that when the city sends something out with the city's logo, the assumption of the people receiving it is that is the view of a majority of the city council, because normally a majority of the city council would be the ones that would authorize the communications. So that's why when, you know, in the past, like the mayor and I have talked about it, I've talked about it with others, if you're going to testify in front of the legislature, if you're expressing the view of a majority of the city council, you would say, I'm the mayor of Gerhardt, and our city council has taken the position that this is important, this is a critically important issue to us. If the council hasn't opined or you're doing it on your own behalf, then you would say, I'm the mayor of Gerhardt, I'm speaking on my own behalf, offering my personal support for this. I believe this is needs to be a priority in our state. So I think that if you had the city mailing something on behalf of one person, like the concern would be that it appears that it would be an official communication from the city versus a communication from one individual. So I think that that's really the and then the other thing too is if unilaterally somebody could decide or instruct the city to spend funds, maybe the other councilors wouldn't have agreed with that, and they're basically taking unitary action. So I mean, as far as best practices go, I would recommend that other than just normal correspondence that goes out from the city, such as water bills, etc., that anything that goes out from the city be authorized by a majority of you. And you sometimes do that, like you'll say, can we put something in the water bill? Or can we put something in this or that? And I think that is definitely just the best practice, and that makes sure that it reflects what a majority of you believe.
Okay, well, that's easy. So we'll add that, Chad. We're not denying the ability to do that. We're just getting a majority of the vote.
Yeah, and would that need to be done in a city council meeting? Or is that something that could be done through consensus and phone calls?
That would need to be done through a council meeting.
There you go.
And what about putting things out on the blog? Again, my concern is when one counselor puts out something that may not represent the entire council's opinion or may actually conflict with another counselor's opinion on the blog, should we? And I know I've used the blog before and people have said, why is she posting something there? So I'm thinking now, I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and if I don't want somebody putting something on the blog that I don't agree with, then I need to abide by that rule and not put something on the blog. What do you think?
So I think that, again, it's kind of like if you're testifying in front of the legislature, if it's a position that the city council has taken a position on, then it would be a good idea for you to point that out. So if you're posting on the blog something that had council consensus at a meeting, like you said, on our January 8th meeting, our council, reaffirmed our commitment to X, then you're making it clear that you're speaking on behalf of the council. If it's something that you personally have done research into that is your own view, you would say, I've heard community concerns around this issue. I've done my own research. My view is X. And that way that people understand that you're either speaking for yourself or you're speaking for the city.
But let's say one of us says something that is off color or wrong, or could end up embroiling the city in litigation, could that be a problem?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Because
I would ask that, frankly, with something like a city blog, and all these communications are not new, but they're not necessarily how cities have traditionally put out information. It's really important to err on the side of caution with this. And, a lot of I've seen city blogs be really helpful in getting out information, but I've also seen instances where city blogs were used to help perpetuate misinformation, not necessarily by counselors, but in the comment section. And so, I think people have probably their own social media accounts. And if you're expressing personal views, then that's probably the appropriate vehicle to use in expressing those views. And please don't opine on things that are going to come in front of you as a council. Because, we really strive to demonstrate neutrality to the community, and that you're, even if it's something you feel passionate about, that you're viewing this neutrally, and willing to listen and learn and make an informed decision.
Thank you, Peter.
So no biased comments out there in the public.
I mean, it definitely makes my job easier if you don't.
Okay. Great. Anyone else got any more questions for Peter on this? Dana?
Oh, yeah. So I can-
Sharon? Preston, you're good? Okay, you got something to say?
No, I was just seeing your plan, maybe that's something.
Oh,
I don't see a hand. Paulina, do you have anything? Got it.
No.
Okay. Work session is over with. Before we go to our city council meeting, we're going